Joining me now on the next edition of the KFS pregame show, here to preview the Knicks' upcoming matchup, a matinee day game against the Detroit Pistons. The fourth time the Knicks play the Detroit Pistons this season, the second time over at Little Caesars Arena in Detroit. He is the managing editor of DetroitBadBoys.com, and his name is Sean Corp. Sean, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. I look forward to the upcoming brutalization of the Pistons by the Knicks.
The actual Knicks. Gotcha. That may happen. You're right.
Yeah. Well, it's happened 3 times before, 4 if you count preseason. So I think the Knicks have Detroit's number this year. A lot of teams do, but that's fine. You know,
it's funny. I think it's the second time they played. It was during the regular season. It was a Friday night game, and it's an inflection point somewhat for the Knicks and for their fans because the Pistons stuck around. The spread was like 8 and change, and a lot of Knicks fans looked at that night as the first indication that like, oh, something's wrong, right? Like we can't even beat the Pistons by more than X amount of points. That was the first game Alec Burks came back, and it was like a Knick homecoming. And I know personally that his final bucket, a meaningless bucket in the last like 10 seconds, beat the spread. So like I suffered that bad beat. So
insult to injury.
Bingo. Yeah. So it was not only a night of concern for the Knicks, but I then am able to look at the other side of the coin with my first question. The vibes in Detroit this year, as it's now become another season of preparing for the lottery and more specifically the top of the lottery where the reward might actually be pretty fruitful. How are the vibes? Are you able to be confident in like it's just a step back, but here to take another big step forward potentially next year? Or were there expectations on this season?
I would say it's been a disappointing season as low as the expectations were, only because this is a young team that's supposed to be building. It's supposed to be building around Cade Cunningham, and Cade Cunningham's gone for the season. So it's like a lost year of development for Cade and for the players who were relying on Cade to lead them, to kind of play off of them, to have him help them be their best selves. That's just out the window. So that's disappointing. The defense is the worst it's been in the Dwayne Casey era. That's disappointing, but that's what happens when you rely on a lot of young players. So there's no kind of rose-colored glasses with this season. So if you can't look at team success, you kind of look at those individuals who are able to develop, who are able to kind of step forward, and then you kind of pencil in those lottery odds after every game. You say, well, darn, it might have been a loss, but losses aren't always a bad thing, so you kind of roll with it.
How I guess you both as a content creator and I'm as a Pistons fan, how much wear and tear has it been on the fan base that like this is just another season of losing? Like is the plan starting to be questioned at all in Detroit?
I think that it's not so much the plan, because it was really next season that I think the entire Troy Weaver era was always intended to be judged around. They have like $50 million in cap space. They would allegedly be entering the last draft where they have a significantly high lottery pick.
Allegedly.
And they have these young building blocks. So it was like, figure out which young players are going to work long term. Maybe you make a consolidation trade for a star. You grab that extra player in the draft and you invest heavily in trades or free agency. There's a little bit of wobble there because these players like Sadiq Bey, to a lesser extent, Isaiah Stewart, they haven't stepped up to the point where they're so attractive of an asset that a team that's trying to kind of get young players or get young good players would make that consolidation trade for a disgruntled star. So that's a little disappointing. And then the Dwayne Casey era, I've never questioned it, except for this year, it's looking a little creaky. I just don't know if his time is kind of, maybe it's going to be up after this year, just because it's been 5 years. A new voice might be ready. The intention was always he was going to be somebody who, when he was ready to retire as a coach on the sideline, he would kind of get that bump up to an executive role and still be part of a team's culture and sort of leading the team from the executive suite. Maybe that's still the plan, but I'm worried that in the second half, there's a chance these players might kind of tune him out, or maybe they're just not delivering that effort we've seen in previous years. And maybe it's not so much an effort thing as just a talent thing. When you're starting the youngest player in the NBA in Jalen Duren, you're starting a rookie on the wing and Jaden Ivey, that horrible defense is just kind of what you got to expect.
It's funny. Those are going to be the two young players I asked about because they have Knicks connections. Jaden Ivey obviously being a player the Knicks tried to trade up for in the draft on draft night. And then he obviously fell to the Pistons at 5. And then Jalen Duren, the player the Knicks traded to the Pistons with Kemba Walker.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
You're welcome. Is that the sentiment that even though this season has been somewhat rough, there is promise in him, and like thank God we're able to get him out of that Knicks trade?
Definitely. I mean, you look at Jalen Duren, and he's such a just massive human being that you sometimes forget he's the youngest player in the NBA, and he's already acquitted himself pretty well. I mean, the rookie standards are rookie standards, so they're kind of graded on a curve. He's still got some work to do on defense, but he is, a huge person that can rebound, that can block shots. He has sneaky good kind of short roll passing ability. Looks like he's never going to be a ball stopper, even if he's not a shooter. And just kind of that sort of center that can control the paint, which is really kind of, like with Mitchell Robinson, is just somebody you like to have because it's one less thing you have to worry about. And you can kind of fit players around him pretty easily with some various skill sets. And so if you're looking at a long-term piece, if you think you have a center that you can kind of count on for 10 years, like you can't beat that at a 13th pick. Yeah.
The debate between Knicks fans on draft night was like, why would we give something like this up just to re-sign Mitch? Because it was pretty obvious once they traded that pick. It's like, oh, so the plan is to re-sign Mitchell Robinson. Got it. There's a backup potential, whether it be in Duren or whether it be who they currently have, which is Isaiah Hartenstein and Jericho Sims, that some Knicks fans, I may be part of this, have been like, we were set on the center position. Like you could find a backup center like Hartenstein for $16 million and you'll be fine. Now that hasn't proved so much this season, but time will tell who wins this trade as far as that's concerned. If he turns into an all-star years from now, or even just like a productive center, more specifically one better than Mitchell Robinson, that'll, I guess, be the deciding factor there. Jaden Ivey, on the other hand, you mentioned how the younger players on the Pistons hadn't risen to a level that would make them attractive in a star trade. This is another thing Knicks fans were familiar with because they were forced to throw in all of the picks and every young player was balked at for the Donovan Mitchell sweepstakes, but it was also for the trade up for Jaden Ivey sweepstakes. And it was like, no, we're good. Your young players aren't what, your fan base might think they are. And I'm curious, have you seen the ceiling at points this season with Ivey that made him such an attractive trade target for the Knicks?
Yeah, you definitely see the elements that make him that top 5 player. Going into the draft, full disclosure, I was more of a Benedict Mathurin fan, but that doesn't mean I didn't understand the premise of Ivey. And that premise has kind of showed itself several times this season, which is just that absolutely elite athleticism and first step where Jaden Ivey can get around a defender without a screen. Like he can just blow by a guy and get into the lane and dunk. And that is something that is very valuable. And he's starting to fold in sort of those drive and kick passes that you want to see as a secondary ball handler. He's getting more fluid with his perimeter shot, which was a big concern going into the season. With Cade Cunningham gone, he's been thrust into a position where he has way too much responsibility. So it's not been a great year for Ivey. His efficiency is very bad. He's turning the ball over a lot. He's shooting too much. But, a rookie. I want a rookie to make all the mistakes they can instead of deferring too much. So I'd rather he kind of fail spectacularly while showing you all those awesome things he can do, because as he gets better, he's just going to kind of eliminate those decisions out of his game as he learns what he can do at an NBA level and what he can't do at an NBA level. But I don't think the Pistons are in a position where they regret that pick or think they should have taken anyone else. I think that everything they saw that they targeted Ivy at 5, they still see that on a pretty regular basis.
This will probably be I'm curious if it's one of the few times you've been asked about this player this season, but just to go through all the Knicks connections before I ask you some larger, much larger Pistons questions. Kevin Knox, how's he doing these days? Knicks former 9th pick in the draft that we were worried about him getting a second contract. He's found out, it seems, a backup home in Detroit. Now, this may be my ignorance. Is he still in the rotation at this point?
He's sort of in and out of the rotation,
okay.
But that's only because I don't think that's a reflection on Knox. I think it's a reflection on sort of a bad team mixing and matching different pieces to try and figure out something that works. And he's kind of at the depth wing position where the Pistons kind of have a lot of pieces that are almost good enough, but not quite good enough to solidify their spot. Overall, Kevin Knox, he plays much bigger than I was expecting in the little I'd seen of him previously. It's not like he's a good defender, but he plays long. He uses his length, and he hasn't embarrassed himself too much on the defensive end. I wouldn't say he's been good, but he's been a pleasant non-disaster on defense. And, he's shooting well. He makes some questionable decisions, but sometimes he can kind of force his defender to overcommit on the perimeter, and he'll just drive the ball in and lay up or dunk or something. And so you're like, yeah, I mean, for as little as they paid him, I'm not going to say it was a big whiff, which they've had in the past on some reclamation type projects. So he's kind of been a pleasant surprise, though not a huge factor. Yeah,
the few members that still remain at the very end of the Kevin Knox hive. From what I could tell, it was mostly that they thought it was unfair that he was mostly judged on who was picked after him. Like Knox goes 9, and then it's like Mikal Bridges, Miles Bridges, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Michael Porter, like all of the Bam Adebayo, like all of these all-stars and really good contributing role players after that,
Well, Pistons fans know that well, picking Kennard right before Mitchell, and they also
you have a Donovan Mitchell. Pistons fans have that too, because Knicks fans took Ntilikina ahead of Donovan Mitchell. So
yeah, and then somebody in front of the Suns guy. Why is the name escaping?
Mikal Bridges?
No, Devin Booker.
We have. Knicks
I think it was
Devin Booker.
Stanley Johnson over Devin Booker. I think.
There you go.
Was the choice. So that's how you end up one of the worst teams for a decade plus. You make those choices. Which
back-to-back drafts, Frank Ntilikina, Kevin Knox, is why Knicks fans can understand this pain and the setbacks that whiffing on draft picks can be. Before I get to the at-large Pistons questions, while we're on the topic of misses, it's just a thing that fascinates me from afar about the dynamic of I hope I'm not bringing up a sore subject, the 2003 NBA draft.
Hey, they won the championship, so
there's no regrets. No regrets whatsoever about Darko.
I mean, the dominoes could have fallen completely differently if there's a Carmelo in tow. Tayshaun Prince doesn't develop. They don't make a big trade for Rasheed Wallace. They draft Chris Bosh. They don't trade for Rasheed Wallace. Rasheed Wallace was the missing piece. Brought him a championship. No regrets.
Okay. It's interesting. I know that some from the outside looking in might say, like, you take Melo, then there's more than one championship, but because you can't guarantee that, you take the one and the banner that you got, right?
Yeah, it was. So it's like a major error that leads to a championship. So nobody really wants to give that credence, which I understand. But like, think about what Toronto did with Kawhi Leonard. They gave up some assets and they got their championship, and then they had to figure out how to rebuild, after that. But it's not like they'd ever regret it just because he's there for 1 year. Like the whole goal is to win a championship, and Carmelo doesn't necessarily mean the Pistons win 3.
Right.
They might win 0. So like it happened how it was supposed to happen.
I fully respect that. As a team that hasn't seen a championship since 1973, I would whiff on every potential Hall of Famer after, if it meant that somehow the dominoes then fell that the Knicks made the other moves that led to a championship. So the Pistons at large, the bigger picture and how it might reflect more specifically to the next month. Do you see them? There's been conflicting reports about what they'll do with some of the veterans on this team, whether it be Bogdanovich, whether it be Nick fan favorite Alec Burks. Do you see them on the roster after the trade deadline?
There's what I hope and what I think, and those are sometimes different.
Mm-hmm.
I would say to Alec Burks first, because of the Knicks connection, I guess. I'm pretty confident he's still going to be on the roster because he has a team option for next season. So that provides the Pistons with maximum flexibility where they can explore trades, they can explore signings, they have all this money. And then if it doesn't work, you've already got a $10 million quality player. And then with an expiring contract, maybe you move him on the deadline next year. But you kind of like that flexibility to make sure you have that piece in the back pocket if you need it. With Bojan, it's tough. The team says they don't want to get rid of him because they want that veteran scorer. His defense on this team of already bad defenders is just showing out in the worst way. So everything he's getting on the offensive end, he's giving back on defense. He needs to be around better players to kind of hide him or at least let him use his skills in a more specific way on defense. And so he's 34. I hope they trade him for at least a first round pick and then hopefully something extra on top. But he's under a team friendly contract. He signed an extension with the Pistons where he gets paid 20 some million next season, which is pretty decent. It's nothing that's going to break the bank or have another team balk at trading for him in the future. And then the final year of his contract after that is partially guaranteed in a very team friendly way. So he's still going to be an attractive trade asset. So I think the Pistons are serious when they say they're only going to trade him for a pretty big haul. And I'm just hoping that haul kind of arrives among the contenders who are kind of desperate for that forward elite shooting.
What would you say that haul looks like?
Personally, I would want a lightly protected pick. So like maybe top 10 protected. So it's still can fall in the lottery, but you're not going to get one of those game changers. And then a young player that's just worth investing in, who's kind of got two-way potential at the forward position. Way to get younger on the wing and somebody who can guard, a very good scorer on the opposing team.
So it's funny you say that because the Knicks currently have a couple of protected picks. And a guy named Cam Reddish that is young enough and still on his rookie contract. I'm not suggesting
I said two-way potential, not
potential.
No way potential.
No way potential. It's funny. Depends who you talk to in Knicks land. There's not just two-way potential, but like 5 ways. He's so talented. Might actually be the most talented player the Knicks have. That as a result, it's criminal that I'm going to get in so much trouble with the Cam Hive when they watch this. The point being, a player like that, regardless of what you think of him, a young player that doesn't have his potential currently being tapped into. And then the Knicks currently, ironically, have the Pistons pick protected 1 through 18. Your pick back, and then maybe they throw in a Washington first, which they have protected 1 through 14. So it wouldn't convert this year, but might convert in the future. Is that a type of package? I'm not even saying I would do it. I'm not even saying the Knicks would do it, but is that the type of deal you're personally like, that's what I would accept back for Bogdanovich?
Probably not, because those are going to be 2 pretty low first rounders. If I have faith in the Knicks to be pretty good, which I sort of do, the Pistons are the Pistons. So they would get that pick back.
Yes.
Washington stinks. Any way to renegotiate toward Quentin Grimes, or is that off the table?
That's off the table. They wouldn't trade him for Donovan Mitchell at this point. So that's the type of player, someone that's actually currently showing promise. And then okay,
somebody who's a reliable wing, if not stopper, just somebody who elevates the defense.
Gotcha. Okay, I think I'd be curious to see what the trade package ends up being if he's traded then, and then if it's not that, what the reaction ends up being. Is there any other veteran that I'm missing that is currently going to be on the market potentially in the next couple of weeks?
From the Pistons,
yeah.
I mean, former Nick Nerlens Noel. Teams are always looking for. Teams are always desperate for veteran center depth at a certain time of year, and so I wouldn't put that past them. Either it's just a throw into a larger trade. I know I saw a rumor that there was allegedly talk of folding him into a Bohan trade with the Lakers because they need depth at every position. But that would be like a protected second rounder. Like just something to
top 55 protected second rounder.
It would be like a do good for Noel, so he can play on an actual good team and not kind of waste away on the bench in Detroit, because Jalen Duren not only leaped him as the backup center, but he leaped Isaiah Stewart as the starting center. And so with Stewart, Duren, and Marvin Bagley, like, they're completely set at the big man position. There's really no spot for Noel to play.
Yeah.
Except for now everybody's injured. So
wow.
So he hit a 3-pointer the other day. So NBA executives, take note. Nerlens Noel defends allegedly and can hit the perimeter shot.
Nerlens Noel's hitting threes now? What is happening?
No, I said a three.
Hitting three now. God,
yeah.
He
hit three.
A 3-pointer. It's funny. Last year, Taj Gibson hit a couple of threes, and it was like, great, we can market him as a stretch
exactly
5. And it's like, or we shouldn't be drawing up plays for Taj Gibson to take a bunch of threes is probably the plan. The Noel has the same thing as Alec Burks, a team option. So even if they aren't able to find a home for him, it ends up just being like, again, the flexibility. This is a Brock Aller special with the Knicks. All of their guys are on team options. I don't think Julius Randle is, but Derrick Rose was 2+1, Burks 2+1, Noel 2+1, and they keep that flexibility with that last season. I think last thing before I let you go, this matchup tomorrow, do you still look at individual matchups? I'm assuming it's not necessarily of can we win this game, but what do you go into a matchup against the Knicks, who have been, I would say, better than the national media suspected. I know for a fact they are better than Vegas thought they would be this season. What do you look for in a game with a young developing team? Is it just cover the spread? Is it don't get blown out? Is that what you're looking for on Sunday?
I mean, not getting blown out is always nice, but really it's just individuals. You want to see the growth in the individual games of certain guys. And then from the opponent's perspective, you kind of sometimes look at matchups. I was always a big Jalen Brunson guy in the offseason. I wanted the Pistons to spend a bunch of money on him. I feel vindicated in my trust in him as an elite scorer, even without Luka. So goal number 1 is don't let him score 40 plus. That would be nice. The Pistons were super high on Emmanuel quickly in that draft. They wanted him before he was scooped up by the Knicks. So I kind of always like to see what he's doing. Don't let him hit 7 3-pointers, get 3 steals. That would be nice. Otherwise, it's this is the first game, I think, versus the Knicks since Killian Hayes sort of turned his career completely around and a light went off and he decided, oh yeah, I'm a strong 6'5" point guard. I can, drive inside and hit a 3. His last 20 games, he's a completely different player than he was his first couple injury marred seasons. So he's a legit good point guard. He's a really good defender. He's one of the best passers in the NBA, probably, considering his lack of personal offense. It doesn't make you overreact. And the fact that he's able to get 7-8 assists on this very bad team is pretty amazing. So I want to see him kind of just see what he can do against this Knicks defense, which I think the Knicks season kind of turned around when they decided to play all their good defenders. Turns out to be a smart move to do that. So part of me thinks it's going to be another ugly game against the Knicks. I think Detroit's already lost by over 23, 2 times out of the 3. So hopefully it's just another close game. Yeah. Put the fear of God in the Knicks, make them question how they could have a game so close against the worst team in the league. I'll take that. I'm
going through first of all, I'm going through his game logs now, and you're almost like to the day that the Knicks won 140-110. The next night, Killian goes for 22 and 8 on 10 of 13 shooting. And like that, like you said, started it, Yeah, it was like, I think really he's very young. Who knows what happened really? But part of me thinks he kind of saw things slipping away. And he's like, because he's not a naturally aggressive player. It's just not part of his personality. But I think he saw sort of like, if I don't start playing differently, my NBA future is going to be in doubt, and I can't have that. And so he just kind of said, screw it. I'm just going to shoot, see what happens. I'm going to be aggressive and see what happens. And it turns out when you have that kind of authoritative game and confidence, good things start to come. And he's been pretty amazing for the last couple of weeks. They play in France on Thursday, right?
Is it that soon?
I think so.
They do play the Paris game, and it really messes up their schedule because they have huge buffers around that.
Yeah, I think it's Thursday against Chicago. So that because they don't have a game until Thursday. So that at least makes sense as far as the schedule is concerned. Then you're right. Then there's nothing Friday, Saturday, Sunday until they play the Bucks on Monday. Yeah. So that would also be good for Killian Hayes. Like
I mean, it's great that he is playing like a legit NBA, not just player, but like a legit NBA starter for a month plus now. Gets to go home, and hey, the Pistons aren't in the playoffs. Make it the Killian Hayes game, no matter what it takes. That's what I want to see.
Would have made more sense if it was like if they made it the Minnesota game that they took to Paris.
That would have been nice because they dominated Minnesota twice already. The Pistons.
There you go.
I don't know how, but I like to see it.
That might speak a little bit more to what's going on in Minnesota this year.
Yeah. Speaking of teams that you put the fear of God in, I think after both Minnesota games, there was articles in The Athletic about is the season lost? We just lost to the Pistons. How could this be possible?
Gotcha. Well, Sean, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. We're recording this on a Saturday, and you took time out of your Saturday to join us here at Knicks Film School. Last question. Do you have any questions about the Knicks before I let you go?
Do you feel like the Knicks are going to make any deals to really solidify things, or are they just going to ride with what they have?
So it's a great question. I cannot see them going, especially since they seem pretty determined to not make a deep playoff run. I think there's more honesty and recognition of the ceiling of this team, that there's no conference finals trip in this team, but like their bench is so limited right now. They're playing a 9-man rotation. One of them on the bench is Emmanuel Quickly, who we love, and he's like a de facto 6 starter. Probably should be starting, but you only have 5 spots at a time. And then it's a backup center, whether it be Isaiah Hartenstein or Jericho Sims, who plays 10 to 12 minutes. Deuce McBride, who anything he gives you offensively is just gravy. Like it's like, oh, he hit 1 of 4 tonight. Great, Deuce McBride. But defensively, he is defending at an elite level. And then it's Obi Toppin, the great unknown of what he possibly could be if featured more, having a point guard. But he's playing Julius Randle's backup minutes at the current time, and also since he's come back from injury, he's been just like locked into the corner. Because Obi's extension eligible this summer, I could see them trading Obi Toppin. I could see them pulling the plug on the Hartenstein experiment and trading him for either a quality wing or some kind of backup that boosts the bench in the Deuce McBride role a little bit. yeah, there's a lot of OG Anunoby talk.
That's going to be expensive. That would be real expensive.
So that's the thing. They have all these protected picks that they got in the OKC trade before they traded Jalen Duren to the Pistons. And they have their own picks, and they have a lot of young pieces that potentially could be moved. And they have like Derrick Rose on a 1+1 on the bench. They have Fournier on a 2+1, but it's again team option, so they're flexible. And then the unknown in Cam Reddish that you could use as salary filler. So all of that to say, I can't see them sticking with this exact 9-man rotation. The fact that Jalen Brunson has been what he is, because even I think the best of projections for him couldn't see like just how dominant he's been in crunch time, how dominant he's been and elite he's been like from 2-point range and hitting tough shots. So I'd be curious to see where that ends up.
Are they in a position where you think they would beg someone to take Evan Fournier for a haul of first rounders to round out their bench? I mean, I'm just saying the Pistons have tons of cap space.
So would you be interested in like an Evan Fournier and a couple firsts to the Pistons for who?
I mean, we got all kinds of veterans.
That's veterans.
You can have Noel back. You could have Corey Joseph.
Funny you say this. There has been a lot in our like post game conversations with the fans that interact with us in the post game shows of bring Alec Burks back. He's the perfect wing. You know, the night that he scored 30 on like 12 shots, right? It was like, see, we should have kept him. You know, so there is an Alec Burks desire. I'd welcome Alec Burks perfectly. He was the perfect bench elite scorer 2 years ago, and then last year I think he was used a little incorrectly as a starting point guard. Yeah, there would absolutely be some unloading of Evan Fournier. I don't think the Knicks would do it because they seem to be stern on not admitting their mistakes. The other part about it is like they've already like survived the storm of like we gave this guy $78 million. We benched him midway through his second season. Like because the team is better. Like you said, they're playing their better defenders. Something happened to him this offseason, whether it's playing in FIBA and like not really having a true offseason. He showed up just like not a step slow, 2 steps slow. So it's like, because they are determined to win, Quentin Grimes taking that step to be the starting 2, Deuce McBride playing over him because you rather the defensive upside than whatever you're getting out of Fournier, because he's also not shooting. He wasn't shooting that great when he was playing either. So yes, I personally would welcome a Fournier salary dump if it meant like getting Alec Burks back, but I doubt the Knicks would unfortunately pursue that.
Well, even if they don't make any moves, it's still a fun Knicks season. So I'll keep watching to enjoy their game coverage and those young defenders that they have, and I'll keep wishing for a day where they decide to trade Quentin Grimes for.
Bohan. We're starting to see more and more why. And now, like to be clear, I don't think Quentin Grimes was the actual untouchable in the Donovan Mitchell trade. If the Knicks say here's a 3rd first-round pick, I think Donovan Mitchell's a Knick right now. I understand why there was like the Jazz looked at Quentin Grimes and said, that's the guy we want, rather than, oh, you threw in RJ Barrett. Great. So Sean, thank you so much again for joining me. Follow Sean on Twitter. His bio, his screen name is in the name tag that's underneath his face. So it's at Sean SEAN _CORP, Sean Corp. Is there anything else you'd like to plug before you get out of here?
If you're ever wondering what it's like to be one of the worst teams in the NBA, you can always read about it at Detroit Bad Boys. I've covered them for 10 plus years of very bad basketball, and I'm very excited for the turnaround whenever that comes. But yeah, you can always read our stuff at Detroit Bad Boys.
Gotcha. Sean, thank you so much for joining me, man.
All right. Thanks a lot for having me.